Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to share with you all a very serious and super sensitive subject that many people wonder about, have questions about, and don't know about. For those of you watching who know me and my family, many of you know that our dad is no longer living. If you're not familiar with us or me, then maybe you don't, but I just wanted to take this video to talk about the details of what happened to our dad. It's not a story any of us talk about very often. It's hard to talk about, it's difficult, it's sad. And I can remember sharing it with maybe 2 or 3 people since it happened back in 2007. So since today's date is July 17th, 2020, I thought it would be fitting to share what happened on the tragic night of July 17th, 2007. So our family consists of my dad, my mom, my older brother TJ, myself, and my younger twin siblings who are Gabe and Gabby. My dad was a great father, a great husband, an all-around incredibly amazing person. He always treated me like a complete absolute gold, complete absolute royalty. He was the first example that I had of how a man should treat and talk to a woman, by the way he talked to me, by the way I watched him talk to our mother, and the way that he talked to and treated my sister as well. Never once saw him yell or raise his voice at all in any way, shape, or form, even when he was upset. And as a result of how he valued me and treated me, I've always had high standards in men and a high value for myself and for my body, because he taught me to do that by being such a great father and a great man and a great example. He thought I was everything, like I was everything to him. And as a result, that helped me to grow up with high self-esteem and not to have to look to men and other means of finding self-worth and self-value. He was just a great person, an amazing person of integrity, very honest, loyal, faithful, consistent, very sweet, very kind, very compassionate, tender-hearted, wise, and loving. If you know my brother Gabe, that sweet, gentle, just lovable temperament and personality, that is my dad to a T. So Gabe is his daddy's son, in that they're very similar in that personality. So Gabe is a little glimpse into the type of person that my dad was. So July 17, 2017, our lives as a family drastically and unexpectedly changed forever when our dad passed away. Each of us, my mom and my siblings, all have a different perspective based on where we were and how we responded to everything, but I just can only speak to mine and what I remember happening that night. So I was woken up in the very, very early hours of the morning, around 2 a.m. by a loud thud and my older brother TJ screaming at the top of his lungs, "Mom," screaming so loud. To this day, loud bumps and thuds are still traumatizing for me, and something that I have to ask God to help me with, because if I hear a loud sound, a loud bang, something loud drop, I immediately react and it just takes me back to that night. I will never forget the sound of that scream and the sound of that loud noise. I actually found out later that my dad had gotten up out of the bed at that time and went downstairs to the basement to talk to TJ, and him and TJ were talking, and TJ has a unique perspective on those events and the reasons that they were talking and things like that. But they had walked up to the kitchen together and were continuing to talk into the kitchen, and that is when my dad collapsed, and TJ actually caught him on the way down. So his scream was a reaction to my dad randomly collapsing in the kitchen. After I was woken up, I remember thinking that someone had broken into the house and hurt my dad or hurt one of my siblings or something like that. And I was so afraid to go out of the room that I just jumped out of the bed and was pacing the floor back and forth and praying. And then shortly after that, I remember my mom screaming my name, calling for me. And I was so scared to open the door and find out what happened that I just yelled back, "I'm praying." But I also knew that I needed to go see what was going on. So I crept out of my room and walked very slowly, very cautiously down the hallway and down the steps to peek around the corner into the kitchen. And that is when I saw my dad's legs. And as I looked further around the corner, I could see my mom frantically performing CPR on him. And I was just mortified and had no idea what had happened or what was going on. Just a quick sidebar in the story. A day or two before this happened, one of us teens, at the time TJ was 18, I was 16, turning 17 in 6 days, and the twins were 13. One of us teens had gone over our data, and if we went over our data, we already knew we weren't supposed to go over our data, and we had to limit texting and whatever would cause us to go over our data. So if we went over our data, our dad would allow our phones to be cut off and keep them off for a couple days as punishment. Because of course, as a teenager, you feel like you need your phone. Your phone is everything. So that was part of our punishment. So in order to call 911, I had to go out of the house and knock on the neighbors' doors because none of us had our phones working. When I was talking to Gabby about this recently, she told me that she also ran outside with me to go find doors to knock on as well. Again, this was the middle of the night / very early in the morning to around 2 a.m. So we're going to people's houses and frantically banging on doors. So of course, for anybody, that would be really scary in the middle of the night, someone's banging on your door. So the first 2 houses that I went to, nobody answered. The third house I went to, I'm banging on the door, and this dad comes out and he's like yelling and screaming and cussing. What do you want? And very angry. And I just remember being like, my dad fell. And then that's when he went, called the ambulance. And then I went out back to the street and just was pacing up and down the street, praying and waiting for the ambulance, waiting for my mom, waiting for somebody to tell me what's going on and what we were going to do next. At some point, as I was pacing and praying, my grandparents pull up and the ambulance pull up and someone calls for me to come back to the house. So as I got back, we were all getting into my grandparents' car, and I remember seeing TJ hugging my granddad, we call him, his head in his chest, and him just like bawling and crying very, very loud, very, very forcefully. And I remember I looked down right away, just rocking in my seat and praying, because I don't know why he was crying. TJ is not a crier. He's not one that you see cry often. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, let me get my game face on, because I don't know what's going on, but it doesn't look good. And apparently TJ had overheard one of the first responders saying that the percent of survival at that point for my dad was some number less than 10%. So that was TJ's reaction that I had caught to him overhearing their conversation. We all got in the car and we followed the ambulance to Troy Beaumont Hospital. I was in the back seat and my mom was in the passenger seat, and I remember her hyperventilating, shaking and breathing very hard, but also trying to be strong and trying to make phone calls. And she was calling some of my dad's siblings, calling some of our close church members, and she was breathing so heavily that I reached up, put my hand on her shoulder and said, "Mom, it's going to be okay." After I did that, I felt her calm down a little bit, and the breathing settled some. She was just really scared, so she needed some comfort and some reassurance at that time. Once we got to the ER, they took my dad back, and the rest of us were waiting in the waiting room. And at this time, I tried to get a hold of Vance, who at that time was my boyfriend. My dad wouldn't allow him to be called my boyfriend, but that's what he was. And I had called him so many times back to back to back, and he wasn't answering, which was not normal because we could call each other at any time and we would get an answer. So he wasn't answering his phone, and I was kind of frustrated. Come to find out later, it was on silent randomly that night for whatever reason. I could not get a hold of him. So TJ and my mom were called back first, and me and Gabe and Gabby still waited in the waiting room for an update, for something. So shortly after TJ and Mom were called back, Gabe, Gabby, and myself were called back. We were led to a room where TJ and my mom both were sitting in there, and we sat down, and TJ very calmly, very maturely tells us, "Guys, I want you to know that Dad didn't make it. Dad passed away." He broke the news to us in such a gentle, calm, mature way, and my mom was sitting right there next to him, and I really don't remember anybody's initial outburst of a reaction, maybe like teary eyes and just kind of looking like confused, like, is this real? Is this serious? And I don't even remember much of the conversation after that in that room. I feel like we didn't have that many words because it was so shocking. Like, we just were up the night before watching a movie together, and then a couple hours later we're being told that he didn't make it. So we were all just sitting there shocked and dumbfounded. And I remember one of us asked what happened, and they told us that he had a heart attack or his heart was sick. I don't remember how they worded it, but we found out that he had a very severe heart attack. And TJ also told us that Dad looked like he was sleeping and asked if we wanted to go and see him, and none of us did because we just didn't want to see him that way. We want to remember our dad living, alive and well, not, you know, our last time we see him, he's in the hospital deceased. So apparently there was some sort of heart condition that has some type of long name that my dad had that he did not know about, that we did not know about. And he passed away suddenly and unexpectedly from a severe, sudden heart attack at 45 years old. So it's just very important for especially Black men to make sure that you stay on top of your health. You are going to the doctor regularly, getting your blood pressure taken, all of those things, because in my entire life, my dad had never once been sick, never once been hospitalized, never once had a runny nose, a cough, nothing ever. So this was a complete and total shock to all of us. And my mom also shares that, you know, in her knowing him, he's never had any type of sickness or ailments at all either. So just a reminder to all to stay on top of your health, to go to the doctors, to get checkups, and to be aware, especially men, especially Black men. I remember asking what was going to happen to the church, and my mom at the time was just like, I don't know right now, don't worry about that. And as I said before, they were co-pastors together, so she actually picked up the baton and kept the ministry going. This event happened on a Tuesday morning, 2 a.m., and she taught Bible study on Wednesday. Boldly, not up there bawling, not up there crying, but taught boldly Bible study on the Wednesday to a hurting congregation with a hurting heart, just taught. I know this wasn't easy for her, and I know even the months and years after this, it was difficult for her. And she shares sometimes that she would be behind the stage bawling, having a moment, having to call her spiritual leaders, get some comfort, and then come out. And no one, not even me, would know that she would have breakdowns before and after she taught, because the strength and the grace that God gave her to continue on his legacy made it look like it was something so easy for her. So we found out the news, we walked out of the room, and I ran into one of my uncles and aunties coming in, and I just remember walking down the hall like crying and shaking my head like no, basically. And then they started crying and hugging, and we all go back to the waiting room. And now the emotions are real. Now it's kind of sinking in, like he's not coming home. We're not going to see him again in this lifetime. And our church members were arriving. Some more of our family were arriving. And I don't remember too much about what happened in the waiting room after that. I do remember, I feel like it was a nice amount of time that we were there with people, just kind of talking about what happened and praying and sharing the story. Crying. I do remember laying out on the chairs and crying, and TJ was sharing what happened. Specifically, he was the one right there when he dropped. So I remember he was telling in detail what happened, and I got nauseous and just ran to the bathroom. I could not even bear to hear that anymore, because it was just so unbelievable and hurtful. So I still hadn't been able to reach Vance, and he hadn't called me back. So TJ at one point called one of Vance's sisters, which is how we were able to get a hold of him. So I was able to talk to Vance, and he was of course trying his best to comfort and be there for me over the phone as possible. But he was in total shock and totally devastated as well, because he had just seen him the day before in what looked like perfect health. So it's just shows how long Vance has been around, how long we've been kicking it. So after we were done at the hospital, we drove back to my house to get some clothes, because we could not imagine staying in the home that we just witnessed my dad collapse in, seeing all of his things, all of his clothes, all of that. And So we grabbed some clothes, and I saw a small circle of, like, I don't know, maybe vomit or blood or something, where the medics had dragged him into the family room and were working on him. I guess that happened. So my mom was just like, don't look at anything, just go straight to your rooms, get a couple of things, and we're out. So we were in and out quickly, went to my grandparents' house. And after arriving and settling in and making any other calls that we needed to make, we all, my mom, my brothers, and my sister, myself, went down to the basement and just spent the night down there together. I don't remember much of what went on or what we talked about. I just remember feeling like we needed each other. And I do remember that everyone was very strong, and we had our moments that night, earlier in that night, of being distressed and distraught. But at that time when we met at the basement, maybe we did have tears, probably so, but it was more of like a warm family, like we're in this together, we have each other. What does everyone need? What does everyone want to talk about? Let's pray, type of thing. And we all slept down there together for the rest of the night / morning. And that was just a night where I felt like we are all we got. And our new life began that night. I will probably do another video on how our lives changed and how things went over the next days, weeks, months, and years after his passing, how we got through it, some of the struggles, who our support system was through the tragedy, how things went with the church, but most importantly, how God graciously and successfully got us through the most devastating, traumatizing, and life-changing thing that had ever happened to our family. And how, although it completely shattered us and knocked the wind out of us and turned our lives upside down, we were able to heal, live, grow even closer as a family, find joy, find peace, and find strength even in devastation. No one understands the loss of a parent unless you have lost a parent. So I hope anyone who is watching who has lost a parent knows that you're not alone in this, and there's hope, joy, and peace on the other side. You can make it through. You can get through it. You can live. Even though I know it seems like it's impossible when that happens, you don't understand how you can get through it. You can, it's possible. If you're out there, you've lost a parent, and maybe you just need someone to relate to, someone to pray with you or for you. Maybe you just have questions about it, and whatever you need in this regard, please feel free to reach out to me. I've been there, and I want to be able to be a resource for anyone who may need extra support, extra love during such a horrible time. Last thing, totally unrelated, but I know many of you are waiting, looking for a update on baby girl Kirkwood, and I just want to let you know that we are all healthy, we are all well, and we will be back very soon with an update video on our baby girl. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Maybe share with some people that you know could benefit or relate to this video.